Hello, I'm Hannah, and this is Hannah's Books, coming to you this afternoon right before we light the candles for the 8th night of Hanukkah. However, since I got a couple of days behind on my Hannah's Book Hookup plan due to a cold, which you can probably still hear, I will try to put up a few more days of videos to keep the holiday light going. Please excuse my incessant tea drinking to keep my voice as clear as I can. Last week, Scott and Nell of the fabulous channel Gunpowder Fiction and Plot put up a really interesting discussion of how booktubers talk about books when we make our videos. How do we make judgments about books? And how do we convey our ideas to viewers? The video features clips from a variety of really fantastic booktubers, and I was just thrilled to be invited to participate. When Scott and Nell sent me the questions, I kind of panicked, though, suddenly realizing that I rarely sit down to film a video in order to actually judge or review books, although I certainly have occasionally. Much more often, I want to talk either broadly about the experience of reading, or more specifically about a specific question that a book raised for me, or a particular theme that several books share. But I do write formal reviews for publication as well. So I was pretty intrigued by the questions they asked, and they really made me think about the distinctions between how I booktube and how I write formal reviews. This morning, I woke up to find that Scott and Nell had expanded their discussion past the initial discussion into an official tag, which I thought would be a perfect one to film this afternoon. So let's get started. I'll be talking about some combination of how I booktube and how I write reviews. In the Scott and Nell style, the first prompt is to tag folks. I will first tag one of BookTube's foremost producers of formal written reviews, Steve Donahue, and one of the newest producers of formal written reviews, Brian at Bookish. And next, I want to tag 4 booktubers whose discussions of books have always really impressed me. Jen at Remembered Reads, Amy at Amy's Dusty Bookshelf, Jennifer Brooks, and Lukash at Cruel Reader's Thesis. The first real question of the tag is, how do you know you've just finished a good book? Is it a thinking or a feeling response? Quite often I think I know within the first dozen pages if I'm going to love a book. Both at the beginning and when I've finished, that response is a gut feeling. I'll talk later about why I might have that feeling with a particular book. But after I have that feeling, I then try to think through why the book made me have that emotional response, or rather how the author might have made particular choices or had particular skills that made the book resonate with me. In general, I usually assume that what I imagine are feelings are actually just thinking that isn't quite thought through yet. Okay, the next question is, when you begin to form your review or rating, what's the first question you ask yourself? Interesting. My first question when I start piecing together a review is usually, what is the author trying to do in this book? And then, does the author succeed at that goal? To some degree, I play out whether it is in fact a worthy goal or if it serves the book well. But I try to be careful there to distinguish between a book that has a pathetic goal and a book that just doesn't want to be what I want it to be. That latter judgment is not the book's problem, but my own. And then, after I think through those questions, I usually analyze what I think the book might have done especially well, and perhaps what it did especially poorly, outside the realm of what the author was trying to do very specifically in the book. Prompt number 4. Do you use star ratings? Why or why not? I don't use star ratings at all, not because I don't provide any judgments, but because, in general, I think they're reductive. I care more about why a book is good or great or lousy or whatever than I do about whether it simply is good or great or lousy, according to some particular reader. I think it was Scott who pointed out that readers of particular genres are more likely to give very high star rankings than readers of other genres. Lovers of literary fiction tend to prize their critical skills, and lovers of fantasy are perhaps more willing to let go and fall in love with a book and its world. Clearly, it seems silly to compare a book that won the Booker but only has 4 stars on Goodreads to an incredibly popular and beloved YA fantasy series. It isn't that both aren't great, but comparing them is far less about quality than it is about style. So I don't care about stars when other people assign them, but it also really stresses me out to have to come up with some number. Through and through, I am a humanities person who has no interest in numbers. I even preferred algebra to basic math just because we were much more likely to be dealing with letters, X and Y or whatever, than with numbers. And to make it even more complicated, I think I would need to use 2 wholly different rating systems. One for what I think is a responsible judgment of the basic quality of the book. And by responsible, I don't at all mean objective, but I do mean reasoned. And the other one, the one I think I would want to use on BookTube, is more about how this particular book worked for me personally, a more emotional response at heart. However, there is an alternate system, which has been intriguing me lately. There are a couple of aggregator sites for formal published book reviews. I'll link to one down below where readers can look up the title or author of a book and see most of the major printed reviews that have come out in the New York Times or the Washington Post, but also Open Letters Review, the Washington Independent Review of Books, the Harvard Review, the Minneapolis Star Tribune, and the Women's Review of Books. That's the second set where I have been pleased to publish. One of these aggregator websites is called Bookmarks, and they collect reviews and then boil them down to just a paragraph or so, then label them as either rave, positive, mixed, or pan. In other words, the reviewers themselves don't choose the labels. The staff at the website do. Supposedly, reviewers can write into the site and ask them to change the labels if they feel they're inaccurate. Still, I find this approach quite a bit more useful than the Goodreads star system. Instead of choosing a star and then trying to justify it, the reviewer is really thinking out how the book works, and then someone else tries to summarize the basic approach of the review into what is basically a 4-star judgment. I've now had reviews summarized as rave, positive, mixed, and pan, which I think is reassuring to me in a sense. While I tend to be analytical in my reading, I shy away from being critical in the criticizing sense, and I was afraid my tone might too often come across as just rave or positive. Still, while I have found it quite useful to read what the website assigns to my own reviews, I'm not sure how useful it is to know what other people's reviews are labeled. What matters to me is not whether the Wall Street Journal fiction reviewer panned a book or raved about it. I want to read how that reviewer panned or raved about it, what he thought and wrote about it. So yes, I give long-winded evaluations and judgments, but I don't give numerical ratings. And I don't give rankings based on quality, although I do certainly have favorites based on more emotional responses, which I may talk about later this month. The next question: do you believe every book has its perfect reader? Does this contradict the idea that a book can be bad? I suspect every book will appeal to some reader, or perhaps that there are sections of books that will be of use to particular readers. I've read a lot of books that I don't think are great books, but which I'm very glad to have read because of my interest in the subject. Right now, I've been reading what are basically examples of a thing I'm trying to learn how to do, and I wouldn't dream of recommending these to anyone, although I'm learning a ton from them. That doesn't exactly answer the question, but even if a book isn't perfect for me, I might get a lot out of it at the perfect moment. What books that you hated have you recommended? I want to say I would never do this, but I think that is not true exactly. Someone I love very much has a history of loving Disney and Broadway musicals. And whenever I read a book that I think is sappy and moralistic, I have been known to scowl and tell my loved one that he would probably like it. I'm not sure this is quite what you mean, Scott and Nell. The next book is a doozy. What makes a book good, bad, or great by your evaluation? In the case of plain good and bad, I think it depends on the book itself. And I don't think I could tell you what would automatically put a book in one of those categories. But when it comes to great or classic, I have an iron-tight rule. It's a book that absolutely can't be spoiled. That is, even if you know every single plot point to come, it's still just as powerful on rereading as it was the first time. That isn't to say there isn't a certain joy in learning the plot points along and along, but that there are also gifts that keep on giving when you get to know the book even more. Great books aren't books without flaws. They're books that really get under our skins and live with us for the rest of our lives. The next prompt gets into that question of what we like about a book a little more specifically. When evaluating the quality of a book, do you have a specific criteria or aspects of the book, such as character development, that you consider? And does this change if you're writing an in-depth review or just thinking about the book for your enjoyment? The quality of writing is definitely really important to me, although I look for different things in different books. Clear and organized thinking and wording are kind of a necessity for a good review from me. Personally, I really love poetic prose, rich with both sounds and imagery, but I certainly don't require it, and when overdone, it really irks me. I also really want to have a compelling main character. I don't need to like that character or subject of a biography or whatever, much less identify with them, but I need a narrative voice that I can invest in some way. What I basically don't care about is plot, as long as it is reasonable. Plots can be bland as anything, and I'm perfectly happy. Really terrific, exciting plots often distract me from my investment in the language or the characters or the themes, in fact. On the other hand, a truly ridiculously stupid plot can absolutely kill a book for me. Next up, do you consider star ratings or averages when choosing books to read or add to your TBR? No, but I do love to read both formal and informal reviews. I often get persuaded to read books because of a great review in the newspaper or journal from a reviewer I love, or from Goodreads, or quite often from a video on BookTube. But again, it isn't the reviewer's star rating that persuades me, but their larger discussion and excitement. My favorite question of this whole tag is, who on BookTube does reliable and interesting reviews of books that you know you can use to decide if a book is for you or not? What makes their reviews so good, and does that booktuber use different language than you to evaluate and review the overall quality of a book? There are so many people I could talk about here, but I tagged 4 people at the beginning, and I want to explain what I think links them. Janet Remembered Reads, Amy at Amy's Dusty Bookshelf, Jennifer Brooks, and Lukash at Cruel Reader's Thesis. All of them give some combination of judgments about the quality of the books they're reading, as well as their personal responses based on emotions or particular interests or whatever. These 4 booktubers read extraordinarily widely, and one of the things I value most in all of their reviews is the way they incorporate context into their discussions. The context of the authors and books they're reading, which are for several of the 4 quite often much older books, where understanding the world in which those books emerged is pretty important, as well as the larger social context in which they're being read. That is, how being a 21st century reader with particular interests might shape what these particular readers can learn from even very old books. So kudos and thanks to all four of you. All right, thank you so much for this fantastic tag, Scott and Nell. I can't wait to see what other people have to say. And thanks to all of you for joining me today here on Hannah's Books. See you soon.